Hi, good morning. I've been given the go-ahead, so can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Employment Committee and to those online joining us this morning. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and there will also be available for viewing after the meeting. The link is available on the Council's website. Can I ask members that they have their microphones on mute until they wish or are invited to speak, and that officers show their camera only when presenting reports and answering questions. I have received apologies from Mr. Bedford today, and we have Mr. Bannister present as substitute, so thank you, Neil. Item 1 on the agenda is we need to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of May. Signed. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Okay. Item 2 is question time. I've received no questions from members of the public. Item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Orders 7.3 and 7.5. I've received no questions from members. Item 4, urgent items. I've not been notified of any urgent items for today's meeting. Item 5, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest in respect of any items on today's agenda from members? No? Okay, thank you. Item 6 is presentation of petitions under Standing Order 35. There are no petitions here today. So we move to our first substantive report, which is item 7. It's the attendance management. It's on pages 9 to 14 of your agenda pack. And Andrea Denham, our HR business partner, will present the report. So Andrea, over to yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you. So the purpose of the report this morning is to update the committee on the absence position at the end of June 23, which is Q1 for 23-24. The background for this report is the last position that we had was at the committee on the 25th of May, and that was at Q4, which was at the end of March 23. At the bottom of page 9 is a table which sets out the previous 5 years end of year position and the end of the Q1, which is the position which is new today. And we've got the FTE days lost per FTE figure across each of the departments and the LCC total, the total FTE days lost and the total cost during those 12-month periods. Over the page, we've also got the same positions for ESPO and for East Midlands Shared Services as well. Looking at the figures, the main trends to note are that the Chief Executives and Public Health Department are below our corporate target of 7.5 days, FTE days per FTE. Environment and Transport, Corporate Resources, Children and Families and Adults and Communities departments have all made improvements since the last position that I brought to the committee. The current LCC total is 9.11 FTE days lost. Attendance management activity is still required for us to move and achieve the position of 7.5 days, which is our target. Moving on through the report into the reasons for absence section, the table at point 8 lists our highest percentage of time lost, moving from the highest percentage down. This is the top 10 reasons that we lose absence, and then additionally the not disclosed category. Mental health, stress, depression continues to be the highest reason for lost time due to illness. There is a reduction from the end of the last position that I brought at Q4 to this position at Q1. But again, as I've said, it is still our highest reason for losing time due to sickness absence. At the last committee, we made the decision to combine the figures for COVID-19 and cough, cold, flu. So what I've done at that second line is actually that's a combined figure over all of those periods for those categories. And if you remember back, that reason is to do with testing in terms of obviously many people are continuing to self-test at home and buy tests, but not everybody is continuing to test through choice, but also many of our workforce are not choosing to spend their income on testing. So we're not, although we are capturing where people report as COVID, some people are reporting as cough, cold, flu for COVID type symptoms. So we've amalgamated that into one category. I still can provide information if the committee wishes for those categories separately, if that is required in the future. So we are capturing it as two separate categories, but reporting it as one. It's also interesting to note that the viral category, which is a separate category, has not been included in the top 10 reasons, and that's been the first time that's not fallen into our top 10 reasons for sickness absence, and is coming out at 2.6% of our time lost for this particular period, 12-month period. So that's reduced. Whether or not that will continue into the next period, with it going into a winter period, but because these are all 12-month periods, they should be comparable to each other. So it is an interesting trend.
If I just pause it there, Andy, just see if any members have any questions on what we've covered so far. Trevor?
This work? Oh, yes. I'm looking at the stress, depression and mental health figures, which certainly would concern, I'm sure, anyone. I'm just wondering whether it's occurred to us that these are self-feeding, in the sense that once you isolate at home, don't come back to work and have the comfort and surrounds of your workmates. And I'm wondering whether, you know, there's a certain element here which says, gosh, actually, it would be better to be, once you've gone through your 5-day COVID isolation period, which it is recommended now to have at the moment, that actually you try and touch base with work colleagues, not on the internet, but actually socially. I'm just wondering whether the rehabilitation element of what we will obviously be trying to do has taken that into account. Thanks, Chairman. And whether that's a valid, logical step that I've said.
My view in terms of people reintegrating after recovering from COVID, obviously, as we know, the NHS have got guidance on their website around children. If you do test and you have a positive result, for under 18s to quarantine for 3 days, and for adults for 5, and that is a recommended amount of time. There's no legal requirement for that now. In terms of individuals, I think it's there is a case for whether or not people feel well enough to be able to return to work, and if they do, we would encourage them with the support of their manager to return to their normal work pattern. So we wouldn't say that people need to work from home or work remotely in a way that they would differently at the moment without COVID. So absolutely, if they've recovered and they feel well enough and they have followed the guidance, then absolutely they can reintegrate into hybrid working and integrate with colleagues.
If I may, Chairman, I do get that, and I wouldn't apply pressure in any way, shape or form, because that's not the idea. My rationale is that I may, after 5 days, let me personalise it this way, and say, I'm not sure I want to go back yet. It's up here. It's me mentally saying that, whereas actually it would benefit me to go back. And I'm just wondering whether we do have a positive lead that may say, go back, yes, to at least your minimum, but pop in.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, my philosophy is work is good for you. Particularly for mental health. It really is down to our line managers, making sure, certainly from People Services, that line managers are having those very constructive but supportive conversations. A line manager should know each of their members of staff to the degree that where they're at, whether it be off work with stress, how they're finding their workload in general, through having one-to-ones, through having performance development reviews. And certainly from my point of view, as being a line manager, my philosophy is I want people to come in and be as a team together on quite an actual frequent basis, because as we were saying earlier, when we do get together, we have conversations we wouldn't normally have, certainly on Teams. It is that support, it is that camaraderie, and that really does contribute to good mental health. And actually, I do think, and obviously Gordon, you might be able to add to this in terms of the Ways of Working programme, it's something we're certainly building on as we move forward with that particular programme. We can't afford to have people isolated for so many reasons, in addition to mental health.
Yeah, I think Caroline's largely covered the points I was going to make, because I was going to just broaden it out from COVID isolation to just generally people being off sick, and therefore away from colleagues, potentially away from the workplace. And so I think it goes beyond in terms of that general isolation. And I was going to link it to, we've talked long and hard about ways of working, hybrid working before in this meeting. Also use the example of new staff, better to induct face to face. So I think that balance between working remotely, returning to work, whatever that looks like, and being in a workplace, and the whole socialisation thing that Caroline's mentioned in terms of contributing to good mental health is something that's really important. And where we can wrap this up, I think, is not just through the Ways of Working programme, but we are about to embark on a kind of communications and engagement campaign to various audiences about of attendance, not absence, attendance, and all that goes with that, and why it's important to us, impact on the organisation, etc. I think we can weave some messages in there.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Linda.
The stress, depression and mental health, do we have any figures on the stress levels? Are they caused through personal reasons, or are they work-related stress? Because that can, obviously, following on, stop people wanting to come back to work if it's work-related stress. And is work-related stress treated any differently to personal stress? Because obviously, if it's work-related, there is, I would think, a lot more that the organisation can do than if it's personal.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I suppose the SAF survey, that's when people tick the box and put something in there if it's an anonymous survey. But yeah, we might come on to that later. But yeah, Caroline.
We have reviewed the capture of our sickness absence reasons in terms of and the causes for absence. What we found is that in the majority of cases, people actually experience stress and mental health as a collection of factors that then lead to that absence. There are situations where it's just personal or it's just work. Obviously, where there is a work element or it is purely about work, yes, absolutely, we've got much more influence over improving that situation for that person. And we have early intervention with all of our cases. So where somebody goes off with stress mental health, we have that is flagged up very early with our performance management team, and they provide early intervention with the managers, so we can actually look at these as individual cases and provide support. And where it's personal, and provide different types of support, and where it's work related, we can provide interventions to try to resolve that absence. So I think it's around us taking each case and making sure that we provide support to the managers so they can get underneath that particular situation for each person, because they vary so differently. But what we found through doing some studies across caseloads, particularly in our areas where we have more stress mental health, which was children's and adults, where we did a specific study, we found that in 5% of cases it was a mix of factors which had then led to the to take time away from.
Carry on, Andrew.
So I'm over onto the top of page 11 now. To note, the cancer and the heart, blood pressure and circulation categories for this period, this 12-month period ending at Q1, have increased, which is a new trend. I'm monitoring that. I've also, just as a side piece of information, I've been speaking to health and safety colleagues around some of our messaging around NHS screening, because as we know, at various points within life cycle, so we may have been involved in being called for age-related screening for various things. So, but actually we need to, although we don't provide that, we can put reminders out to our workforce around actually at particular points in your life, you will be called for various screening, and actually we want to be able to support you to take up that screening. And it may be that you use the flexibility of our ways of working in negotiation with your manager to be able to attend appointments like that. And that's what we would like you to do, because prevention is really what we want in terms of health management of our. So we want to try and do some work on those messages.
It'd be interesting to break that down, because obviously most people now have watches or phones that give you your blood pressure. So it might be that more people are aware and they say, oh, my blood pressure's high. So it's, it'd be interesting to see a breakdown.
Yeah, absolutely. Also at the committee on the 25th of May.
Sorry, Richard, did you want to have that?
I've forgotten why it is that we still disclose categories. I do see, sorry, going back on it's rose and then it's come down again. But I've forgotten why it was that not disclosed is still a possible option. I mean, there must be a reason. So sorry, that's one.
We used to have two categories which we discussed a period of time ago with Employment Committee. We had an other category and a not disclosed category. We removed the other category because it was unhelpful. The not disclosed category is for a legal reason. We have to within the first 7 days, so prior to somebody providing a medical note. Although we have discussions within our attendance management procedure for people to discuss with their manager, and we capture those reasons, we have to have a not disclosed category within our system. So it's a legal reason, which I can provide some more information outside of committee, because I haven't got it. That was the reason for legal compliance. The reason, what we discussed at the last committee was obviously we were unhappy with the level that was going into that category, and obviously the more information we can capture, the better we can manage attendance. And I've been doing work with colleagues to try and bring the amount of information that falls within that category down, because it's not reflective of the amount of information that we don't know, it's reflective of the amount of information that's not getting updated into the system. So we're continuing to drive that. Administrators and business partners and advisors to improve this category. So that continues to be a work in progress for me to bring that information to a higher level of compliance and to bring that information, to bring that figure down.
Thank you.
Just ask maybe a note to members who are here today, just to sort of define the what that includes, just offline.
At point 13 is a breakdown for the 12-month period at the end of Q1 of the long-term and short-term breakdown, which reflects our usual pattern. There isn't anything that looks unusual to me in that pattern, unless anybody has any queries. This is usually how our absence splits. It's usually the long-term cases are the larger balance of the time lost. And as we've discussed previously, we've got particular support for those managers that are dealing with our most complex long-term cases to resolve those for the organisation and for the individual. We've also, to note, been making some significant improvements in timescales for resolution of our ill health retirement since the previous report. So we are making some good progress in terms of resolution for individuals who've had some delays from us waiting for NHS reports. So we've started to see some real traction back from the NHS in terms of getting the information that we've been waiting for, which is a really positive thing. And for the individuals that have been waiting for answers about their ill health retirement. So that's very positive. And then at point 14 is the information for the last 5 years. So these are 12-month periods, the FTE days lost per FTE for the breakdown into each of the departments, and then the Q1 figure in the final column to give you a flavour of the detail, and you may have particular areas of interest in terms of your areas of the council that you work with than others, to digest those. In terms of recommendations, it's to note the contents of the report. Questions other than those that have been raised, and the
Thank you. Members, any questions?
Again, yes, it was just that NHS information stream which we are unfortunately have to wait for. How significant is it still?
Today it has improved to an acceptable level. My summary would be, I think we went through 6 to 9 months of significant delay. I think as a strategic business partner, I would usually not oversee ill health retirements. They would normally be managed with my operational manager within HR. But actually we had 4 times as many ill health retirements waiting than we would usually be comfortable with, to the point where I was monitoring those with the management team for a 6-month period, because that needed to be escalated, and we were looking at what we might be able to do to work around that situation. We explored lots of legal opportunities, but unfortunately we are not able to make any decisions about ill health retirement without that medical information from the NHS. So we were in a really place, and I know Caroline had some very upset individuals contacting her as head of service who are waiting for decisions. We are in a much more comfortable position, and we are getting people quicker decisions. So the NHS seems to be, the information is flowing better. So no, I'm now not concerned about the risk, but there was a period I was.
Chairman, it's just that I was going to go whether it's admin or whether it's practice, which is holding things up. But since it's going down, it's not worth splitting that up and being sharper than we are, because you've got it in the right direction. Thank you.
Barry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be interested in how the work from home programme is. Obviously, people have different levels of resilience. So you catch a cold, some people come into work, some people stay at home. And obviously, you don't feel like you can do a 7.5, 8 hour shift at work, but you can do a few hours through the day if you're at home. break a leg, you're immobile, you can't get into work, but you could be working. Are we actually looking at the work from home program and seeing how it's breaks down, and if it's actually having a positive impact on people that are poorly that are still able to?
Yeah.
Oh, your mic's come off, Gordon. So
You want to talk? I think it's a really good question. It's something that we've considered. How do we get that message out in a fair and equitable way? Because if somebody is too ill to work, we shouldn't be putting pressure on them to work, wherever that work may be. Having said that, you're absolutely right. There are situations where in certain roles, and we have to bear in mind we have a lot of frontline roles people who can't work remotely or from home, but we do have a lot of roles where people may be infectious, so they shouldn't come into a workplace, but are still well enough, fit enough to work from home. And I think some flexibility, just in that good management relationship, in discussing with your manager and saying, look, I may need to do a slightly shorter day, and just coming to a sensible agreement is better than going off sick. But as I say, it's a real balance. It shouldn't be, those conversations shouldn't be difficult if the relationships are right, but we do have to be careful in how we get the messages out there so that we're seen to be, fair and balanced about it.
Might just be helpful for me to add to that. Obviously, being I had a service for quite a large service of 100 people. Unfortunately, what we can't do is actually capture that data to see what is happening in practice. I most certainly know from my service, I've got my colleagues with me, there isn't any pressure for anybody to work if clearly that they're not well. But absolutely, the culture that we certainly have is, if you're well enough to do some emails, you might not be well enough to attend a meeting. If you're well enough to sit down and write a report, but you obviously can't go out to that establishment, that really does happen in practice. And I sincerely do feel it has really contributed to the bottom line sickness absence figure. But I can say that because I know people's services is very low. And again, anecdotally, when I get together with other heads of service, we only had a meeting the other day, didn't we, Gordon? It is happening. It is happening in other service areas. But it's such a shame we can't capture that. That'd be a really good figure to capture, but obviously we can't tell that. But that's the culture that we're moving towards. Definitely, if you please can do work hybrid, but if you are too ill, then clearly you should not be at work. I don't know whether that helps.
Okay. Thank you.
Betty.
You, Chair. Just a quick question. Have we correlated the reasons for absence with different services and departments?
The departmental management teams do get a breakdown of reasons for absence for their areas. So yes, we do have that. If there are particular departments that you would like to see the reasons for absence breakdown, I can arrange for that information.
Right, thank you. Presumably we get a quarterly report here. I mean, many reports through this council are on an annual basis. We get an annual report comparing last year to this year. So this is obviously a quarterly one. Presumably you run these monthly, weekly, daily, and they just tot up and build into a quarterly report. I was just wondering how often you did run the report, whether you've got a system that says, yes, this is the daily total today, this is a weekly total, this is a monthly total. There is.
We have struggled with some of our reporting, so we're able to get the reports out at this level. Once we can get the right data of the system at the right time, it's live data. So, but just to reassure you, management teams, it comes back to the point you just made, management teams and departments are getting the level of data that they need to then manage sickness absence in departments and with services. But as I say, we're still working on a long-term reporting solution to get the data in the way that we want it out of Oracle.
Members, I think we've discussed it. We're asked to note the update. So does everyone agree that it's noted? And thank Andrea for the report and everyone for chipping in. So thank you. The next item on the agenda is the pay policy statement 24/25. It's on pages 15 to 32. And Sarah, our HR Services Manager, is going to present them. Sarah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek approval for the Council's pay policy statement for 2024-25 prior to forwarding to the County Council for approval in December of this year. So just as a bit of a reminder, under the Localism Act 2011, local authorities in England and Wales are required to produce and publish a pay policy statement for each financial year. 2024-25 statement needs to be published on or before April 2024. And I'd like to draw members' attention to the pay policy statement at Appendix A. For the purpose of the statement, remuneration includes basic salary, pension, and other allowances arising from employment. Grading of all posts, with the exception of centrally employed teachers, is determined by the Hay Job Evaluation Scheme, to ensure a fair, consistent, and non-discriminatory process of legislation. In terms of the 2023-24 pay award, the national employers have made an offer of £1,920 on National Council pay points, up to the National Joint Council scale of spinal column point 43, and a further award of 8% of those above the maximum of the national pay spine, but below Deputy Chief Officer salaries. As the County Council has its own pay spine, this pay award will require the removal of 2 in our pay spine, stay ahead of the national average, which is currently predicted to be in the region of 11 on the 1st of April 2024. In terms of the pay award, to give you a bit of an update on where we are at the moment, we're waiting for the result of the GMB Union ballot, which closes on the 24th of October. And if there is no mandate for industrial action and agreement is reached, details of the pay award will be circulated to the committee at that point. Timing of the GMB ballot means that if agreement is reached, the earliest employees will receive the award and back pay will be in the December pay run. And Appendix B, which is our local pay spine, will be updated to reflect the pay award if agreed prior to submission to full council in December. So in terms of the recommendations, the committee is therefore asked to approve the pay policy statement for submission to the County Council on the 6th of December, and to note that following the agreement of the 20 pay offer, the new pay structure will be circulated to the committee. Has anybody got any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, on paragraph 12, you say that when the members were balloted, the ballot didn't reach the required 50% threshold, but of that, 71% were in favour. Do we actually have a figure of that threshold? I mean, if that was 71% of 5% of the members, it would have been a very small number. So was it 49% that voted?
Yeah, I haven't. Have you got? Yes. Yeah, it's. I can get that figure for you because we have got that information, so I can come back to the committee and give you that figure in terms of the actual percentage threshold.
Thank you, because it just helps us understand amongst the members how they feel. Because if 1% turned up, then you know, etc., and gives you a feel. So, thank you.
Questions? We have no further questions. We are asked to approve the pay policy statement 24/25 for submission to the County Council for approval at the meeting on 6th of December 2023, and also note that following agreement of the 23/24 pay offer at national levels, that the 23/24 pay structure incorporating the NJC 23/24 pay award will be circulated to the committee. Does everyone agree? Sarah. Item 9 on the agenda is the staff survey 2023, found on pages 33 to 42. Gordon, our Assistant Director, will introduce the report. Then we have Richard Wilding with us from the Business Intelligence Team Leader and Business Partner, will present the report alongside Tableau data. So we also have Joe Miller online this morning. Morning, Joe, just to assist if need be or oversee proceedings. So it's over to yourselves. Thank you.
Okay, just a very brief introduction from me. I think members are aware that we run a staff survey, full staff survey, approximately once every 2 years. We ran it during the spring and early summer this year, and colleagues in data and business intelligence have been analysing the results. And what we've been doing over the last few weeks is engaging with key stakeholders to really understand, getting under the skin of the feedback, if you like, so that we've got a good view of what people are telling us. And the results are now out and available to all staff. So we've decided over the last couple of surveys just to open them up to all staff, and they're able to use Tableau and interrogate down to a certain level, which Richard will cover. So Richard's going to present the headline messages, but from an employment committee point of view, our intention would be to come back to a future committee with a corporate action plan, kind of you said we did, so that we show we're listening and we're clear on the areas where we can take action. But I think it's also important just to think about the areas where actually we can't do anything about it, circumstances beyond our control, and we're clear with the workforce on those areas as well. So there'll be a corporate action plan, and individual departments we've asked to produce local, more targeted action plans. We wouldn't necessarily bring those here. Those will be different flavours for different departments, if you like. So over to you, Richard.
Pop your mic on, Richard. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Hopefully that's picking up okay. So it's the 10th staff survey that we've carried out since 2006. It was done over about 6 weeks, ending in early July this summer. We received 2,800 responses from employees, and the view that should be appearing on the screen there shows the response rate that we've had to different surveys going back to 2006. So the most recent survey on the far right, that 2,800 staff translates into a 46% response rate. So in the context of previous surveys, it's quite a reasonable response rate. It's not as high as the 54% that we had back in 2019. It's considerably better than we had as the last survey in 2021. So in terms of the questions that were asked, survey, this view gives an overview of the structure of the survey. We asked 21 core questions under the headings My Council, My Manager, Job. And we also asked some additional questions in relation to bullying and harassment, discrimination, and factors that are important to people in their work. Vertical grey line which goes down the first 21 questions, that shows the all questions average. So the orange dots to the right of that average are areas where people are more positive. The areas to the left are areas of positivity from the people who responded. So here there are some areas with very high satisfaction. So for example, up at the top right there, we've got people agreeing that the councillors are good. So 93% felt for the council. Some other areas of particularly good responses, feeling that the council's committed to equality and diversity, 92%. And way to pick out under the job section, 2% felt trusted to carry out their job effectively. Some areas are very, very positive responses. Some areas where people were less satisfied, particularly areas around change being well managed. So 62% agreeing that change is well managed. So 70%, just over 70% agreeing they feel the reasons for change are well communicated. One other area of lower perceptions is around stress. So just under 61% agreed that stress at work does not affect. So that's one area of relatively lower satisfaction for survey respondents. In terms of those responses, you can see at the top of this view aims to look at which demographic and work groups are either significantly more positive in their responses or significantly less positive. So areas where there's an orange dot, that's where there's a statistically significantly higher level of satisfaction from that group in relation to particular questions. Areas that are shown in dark blue are areas where there is a significantly less positive response. So perhaps I'll just pull out in relation to the average for all of those 21 questions, looking across that average top. There are some groups which across all questions are significantly more positive. Those include staff members aged 16 to 34, members of staff that are on grade 13 or above, so and people who work in health departments are significantly more. There's one group here which I'll say more about in a moment, but staff with disabilities, they were significantly less positive in their responses, or the average to all of the survey questions. And you can see, looking down for all of these core questions, staff with disabilities were less satisfied in their responses to. In terms of changes since the last survey that we carried out in 2021, this view shows those 4 questions sorted by the percentage point change that we've seen since the last survey. So here, dark orange represents a significant improvement since the last survey. Dark blue represents a significant reduction in satisfaction since the last survey. So we can see from this chart here, there are 3 questions at the top which are marked in dark orange, and they're areas where we've seen a significant improvement over the last few years. So those areas, particularly work-life balance, standing out with just under a 5 percentage point improvement. Also improvements in people having a say in how they work, feeling that stress at work is not a problem. So while stress is one of the areas of lower satisfaction, we have seen improvements over 2 years. It's also worth pointing out in relation to these questions, the work-life balance question at the top. This is the highest ever result that we've seen. So we track these results over time. Since 2006, we've asked this question, and this is the highest we've seen in response to that question. Having a say in how people work also over time, which is a very positive response compared to previous years. There are 3 areas that you'll see at the bottom where we've seen a reduction since the 2021 survey. So these areas relate to change management and the perception that the council values its staff. While we have seen a change since the 2021 survey, these results are all similar or slightly better than the 2019 survey that was 4 years ago. So in the context of previous surveys, these results aren't too bad, but they have taken a bit of a dip. I think one theory that we've possibly got is that at the time of the last survey we've done communication in relation to the COVID pandemic. Perhaps over the last couple of years, that level of communication is a little bit less communicated than 2 years ago. It's just a sort of suggestion as to why we might be seeing these results. In terms of a bit more detail about the changes that we've seen since the last survey, this view again looks at the different work and demographic groups, and where we've got a blue marker, this shows we've seen a statistically significant reduction in the satisfaction of a particular group. Where we've got orange upward pointing triangles, that shows that we've seen an improvement satisfaction of a particular group in relation to a question. I think probably the main thing to point out here, the all questions average at the top of this view, there's one group here which we've seen across all those average questions, they've got a significant improvement, and that is staff with disabilities. So we've seen a 4 percentage point increase in their average responses across all of them. So while there is a gap in terms of disabled staff being less positive than have seen an improvement and a narrowing of that gap 2 years. And I think quite a lot of work was done to try to get under the skin of the reasons for that lower satisfaction over the last 2 years. And we're hoping that some of those conversations and some of those actions that have been taken have led to this. There is still more work to do to this group. The survey asked questions about bullying and harassment. So the core question here that has been asked over a number of years is question 22, which asks whether members of staff in the last 12 months have experienced bullying or harassment at work. A total of 9.7% indicated that they had. This question was asked with a response scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. 4-point scale, 9.7% of people either agreed suffered some bullying or harassment. And groups, you'll be a little bit familiar with these charts, but there are two groups which suggest that they're more likely to have experienced bullying or harassment, and those are disabled staff. 17% of those are agreeing, the 9.7% average. Staff that self-describe their gender, they're a group which appear to be more likely to suffer bullying and harassment.
I'll just ask on the elected members, is that bullying by elected members or is that bullying experience from elected members? That's the question. I can't remember it. I did look at the survey, but I'm not a member of staff, so I didn't complete it. So.
Question, the second batch of questions here, they're new to the survey this year. They were asked asked people about the source of any bullying or harassment, and it was a different question response scale that was used here. So we asked people to indicate a great deal, a fair amount, not very much, or we aggregated the three response options that suggested any bullying or harassment and added those responses together. And it was we were a bit puzzled at first when we looked at this because we're seeing significantly higher levels here than in response to question 22. So, for example, customers and service users, 25% of staff are indicating some form of bullying. When we unpicked the results a little bit more in the background, we found that a large majority of staff who answered positively here were ticking the not very much column. So the numbers that were indicating a great deal or a fair amount of bullying were. But in response to your question, this is indicating some form of bullying or harassment from members. In terms of that 3.7%, a bit more detail around that. The numbers or the percentages that indicated a great deal or a fair amount were 6%, related to about approximately 16 members of staff. It's relatively small numbers, but say that we don't take.
Yeah, please do.
Just to add a more general point around this, I mean, I think, as Richard said, we've asked that top level question for a number of years, number of surveys, and always been conscious of the need to get below that headline, if you like, and understand if people were feeling that way, what's been causing it. I think, as you said, the figures have kind of confused us a little bit because they've gone higher than the headline response. But I think the point I was going to make is we might have policy and dictionary definitions of these terms, but we're just asking the question. So that could mean lots of different things to different people, from the very, very minor to something that's quite major, needs to be investigated, etc. And the other thing that we've tried to do in the background, and this is a more general point, is to make it much clearer about reporting mechanisms. So support available for managers, paths through for managers, how to deal with where people are coming into the workplace and saying, I feel like this. And then the support available for individuals as well. Sorry, I'm getting into solutions, if you like, but I just thought the context was important.
I mean, for me, it was just making sure that, if there's an issue with members, that this is a staff survey, so obviously there's got to be that mechanism to say, we have a problem with a member potentially, and that needs passing through, whether it's the group leaders, the party leaders, etc., etc. So, but that needs addressing as well, because See, so Trevor.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think it's important then, since this has cropped up, and staff have been very clear in what they're saying, that they should actually be asked to quantify a little bit more what type this is of bullying or harassment, because it's very subjective. Some people are quite sensitive, others like me are not. I can, you can hurl abuse at me and I'll just smile at you. It's a make a note, but it's a simple thing. But joking apart, I think it is important that we as a joint employer understand exactly what it is. And I think you said we ask, okay, tell us a bit more. And if you can, tell us who. Because, I challenge, I put it this way, as a member, I challenge some officers' decisions. I think it's it's part of my rationale to do that. They're the professionals. I'm the lay person, and I'm very clear about that. I say, does that logic stack up? Is that right? Now, if that's harassment, guilty. If staff feel pressured, guilty. But I do make it quite clear that you guys collectively are the professionals, not me. So I think we need to tease this a bit. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, and it's a member briefing note, just addressing this point, but also I think that general communication, which doesn't necessarily ask individual people to come forward, but just gives the pathway. So it's a real balance, because it can be very sensitive areas, as you can imagine, but we'll certainly pick it up in the action planning.
I really do think we need to, in view of that, stand it.
Saying that I was being saying. And never said, member challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having worked for the authority for a number of years, one of the things that came up, and you mentioned about that this is anonymous. Certainly when I worked here, a lot of my colleagues felt that it wasn't anonymous. And that is why the take-up of doing the survey, I feel, is so low. People felt there was perhaps a number on it that, they could be tracked back to. If they put a negative comment, it would affect their relationship with whoever. So I think that, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I think the fact that so many people feel that it isn't anonymous, it's getting your point across that it is. How you're going to do it, I don't know. But I think if you can get that across, you will have a larger uptake of members of staff.
Absolutely recognise that, and sometimes it's the same issue when we're asking people to declare characteristics, road equalities onto the system. There's a kind of natural suspicion and concern. I think in terms of the staff survey, what's probably helped is us publishing the results, and those results go down to assistant director level, but not below. So they're kind of aggregated at assistant director level, which will be a number of services, and we don't go below that. And then I think you would analyse the comments, if the comments are published, to make sure that they are, there's no leads into, any particular service area or individual that might be mentioned. Those are anonymised.
Staff surveys are the same across all industries, aren't they? There's that question: is it anonymous? So yeah, thank you. Richard, back to you with the presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, we do our best to sort of communicate that it is anonymous, and I mean, my team analyses the results. I don't know who said what. There's no way to find out. I mean, we ask people to declare that it's assistant director and some demographic information, but it's possible to find out who said what. Do our best to tell people that. Accepted or believed. There's not too much more to go through. This view looks at discrimination. So the question that's asked here is, in the last 12 months, have you felt discriminated against in the workplace because of one of these factors that's listed on the screen? So the question at the very top aggregates any positive responses or anybody who stated any perceived discrimination. And the overall result tells us that 27% of people felt that they had been discriminated against in relation to one of these protected characteristics. And this is very similar to the 28% that we had at the time of the previous survey in 2021. Some groups you can see are more likely to state that they've experienced some form of discrimination. So, for example, staff from ethnic minority, 24% response there, up from a 27% for all staff. And you can see, probably looking down the list, that certain groups are more likely to feel discriminated against in relation to factors other than their pride. So, for example, staff with disabilities against on a range of different. We ask people about how much a number of factors are important to them, their job. We asked them about 4 different things which are shown on this view. In relation to change over time, and this dashboard shows the changes since we last asked this question in 2021. I'm showing you this view because I think it's quite interesting to show that in relation to pay and benefits, across the board almost, people are telling us that this is more important to them than it was. I think this is possibly reflecting sort of cost of living pressures on staff. Those were the dashboards that I was planning to take you through. You might be relieved to know. We did have quite a lot of free text comments, and there are a number of dashboard views which lets you look at the topics that are picked up in those comments. The actual comments aren't available here, but they've been categorised so you can see the kind of comments that were made. Just for example, pay and benefits was the top issue that was mentioned. That was mentioned by 15% of this has been the case in previous surveys, so it's an issue, but 15% of people did mention that. So just to summarise really, I think one of the issues that probably comes out of this in relation to employees with disabilities, they are still less positive on all questions. There has been an improvement in the responses from that group of staff, and the gap has narrowed since the last survey was done. And the results dashboards that you're seeing here, they are available for members via the we can make that link available should they wish.
Thank you, Richard. Questions from members? Neil, please. Thank you.
I hope the microphone picks me up. I just really want to follow up a little bit the comments by Mrs. Broadley on the sake of responding to the survey at 46%. I appreciate that's an improvement where we were 2 years ago. It's the pandemic effect, which hit the patient response at that point. Then going back to 2019, 54%, and the years exceeding that, there was that upward trend. The key really is to get a greater response to the survey. By the response, the greater value that these figures tell us. So 2 questions. One is in respect of similar organisations, what sort of uptake of staff surveys are there? And where does Leicestershire County Council fit comparable to other organisations? Are there organisations that are doing a better job giving responses than we are? If so, what are they doing that perhaps we should be considering? And secondly, with regard to the action plan, you said we did. Some part of that action plan that will concentrate on encouraging greater response in and giving that reassurance, anonymity, and other methods that hopefully greater response figure.
It is interesting. Benchmarking and sort of peer data is always a nice comparator for sort of members to see how we are doing, and it obviously gives you that, but you probably going to tell us about this anyway. So.
Not too much. I think different organisations use slightly different surveys and ask slightly different questions, and they carry surveys often in slightly different ways, and quite often they don't size the results when they complete. So benchmarking them is quite difficult. I know the civil service and the NHS, they do carry out staff surveys. I have to say I'm not quite sure what the response rate is. Probably. In relation to trying to drive up response rates, we do have quite a detailed communication plan which we've put together in relation to service, and it included things to the intranet, emails to all staff, emails from doctors, posters up with QR code, scan and survey on their own devices if they're, there was quite a range of different methods that people could use to survey, but we are always looking for suggestions of ways that we could drive up those response rates, and we do look at that. In relation to the action,
yeah, I think just in relation to, well, maybe another, just to add to Richard's point around, we obviously have a couple of thousand staff who are, say, less connected centre, if you like, that access to, they're out delivering frontline services, and we need to do extra work, via management teams sometimes to get them to engage in surveys. So that's sometimes a challenge as well, but that's something that we do try, and Richard mentioned a couple of options there. I think in terms of action plan, we can absolutely put something in there. The other thing I thought of is if we, as part of our action plan, we decide to do any small period, we can also get messages out around anonymity, aggregation of responses. Try and get that reassurance going in between the buy-in. Range of things I think we can do.
Thank you. Any more questions, members? We're asked then to note the summary of the outcomes and actions identified from the 2023 survey and support the approach being taken to address the findings of the survey. So, members happy? Thank you. Thank you for that, Richard. Good presentation. Thank you. Item 10 is our report on the Council's trans and non-binary policy. It can be found on pages 43 to 58. And Leon Cherikar, our policy manager, is with us, and he's going to present the report. So, Leon.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief in my introduction because I'd value a chance for people to have a discussion around this topic. The policy is being developed through our outcomes framework to ensure that diversity is celebrated, people feel safe and well. And we have specific policies for people who are more likely to experience discrimination or harassment. Policy sets out the legal framework around the Equality Act, Gender Recognition Act, and general data protection regulations. Sets out the context, key definitions, understanding of some of the barriers that trans and non-binary people face. It then moves on to set out a code of conduct for staff and what support is available for staff as well. The policy complements other policies linking into support for staff who are trans and non-binary, and it is a complex area, so it is policy and guidance only, and individual circumstances and situations will need to be dealt with within the context of this policy as frameworks. But it's a really, I think it's a really good opportunity to have a policy in place and guidance in place, and welcome discussion.
Okay, thank you. Members, comments or questions?
Can I thank Leon for the absolute depth of work that's gone into this, and I read it twice, and it is complex and complicated. I do agree, and I think we should say this council, honesty, takes this very seriously. Has done in the past, demonstrably, and I trust off the back of this excellent report will continue to do so. I've no questions. I just think that that is
your comment. Gordon, did you want to add something?
Only to say, just to perhaps back up Mr. Pendleton's point around how seriously we do take EDI, and you know, we continue to try and be progressive. This is a really sensitive area, and you know, nationally there are right-wing press, right-wing views that are kind of anti this area. It's a really difficult, sensitive area, so I'm really pleased that we've forged ahead, got this policy out, and we're using this, and we stick to our principles, if you like.
I think the only comment I'd make is the word trans. It's a shame we can't use. I prefer the word transgender in full, but it's obviously being picked up. It's obviously used nationally and worldwide. But I mean, obviously, trans and non-binary. Just the word transgender is my preference from a sort of education I sort of was brought up with. But no, it's really good to see the policy in place. And if members have got no further questions, for us to note that this adopted policy, and obviously the staff guidance on working that we have within the council service. Thank you, Leon. Yeah, thank you. That's it. Our final report today is the Organisational Change Policy and Procedure Action Plans on pages 59 to 64 of the agenda pack. And this is for Damien Buckley, our Democratic Services Officer, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a report that regularly comes to committee, and it just outlines provides an update, of the current action plans and completed action plans, and members are just asked to note the contents of the report and the appendices.
Any comments or questions on the appendices in the pack? No? Okay, thank you. In that case, we have noted the update provided, so thank you for that, which contains provision for compulsory redundancy and details of progress in their implementation. Agenda item 12, as mentioned earlier, we don't have any urgent items, so that just leaves me. Oh, sorry, Gordon. Yeah, going back to item 11.
It's not an urgent item, but just a point of clarity. I managed to find out the answer to the question around the unison pay vote. So approximately 25% of those eligible to vote actually voted. Was the turnout of those? Roughly 71% yes vote, 29% no. But in terms of the legislation, it has to be over 50% for both to then be a valid. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. Okay, date of next meeting, item 13. The date of the next meeting is on Thursday, the 7th of December, again at 10 o'clock. So can I thank everyone for attending today's meeting? I hope those online enjoyed the meeting as well, and I will now close the meeting. Thank you.